I have been working as a canine handler for almost 9 years now. My partner is a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rex. Rex is trained in tracking and narcotics detection, and he is as solid as they come. He does not spook easily. Over the years, I have taken him into dark warehouses, abandoned houses, and thick woods in the dead of night, and he has always remained completely steady. That is why what happened on this particular night has stuck with me for so long. We were called in to assist patrol on a house search after a foot pursuit in the area. Officers had attempted to stop a male suspect just a few blocks away, and the man had suddenly run. They chased him through several backyards before losing sight of him near this specific property. When the officers searched the exterior of the property, they found a side gate leading to the backyard wide open, and the back door of the house was completely unlocked. To make things even more urgent, neighbors had also reported hearing some kind of struggle in the backyard just moments before we arrived. Patrol officers did a quick sweep of the first floor, but they were not comfortable calling it safe just yet. They believed the suspect might have forced his way inside and could still be hiding somewhere in the house. Rex and I arrived about 20 minutes later. The house was a nice, 2-story place located in a quiet subdivision. There were no obvious signs of forced entry from the front. The officers on the scene briefed me quickly. Long story short, they told me there were no obvious signs of a struggle inside, just that open access at the rear of the house, and the fact that the suspect had vanished within yards of it. I put Rex on a short leash and gave him his search command. He pulled forward immediately, moving from room to room on the first floor. The living room was clear, the kitchen was clear, and the laundry room was clear, so we moved upstairs. Up there was a narrow hallway with 3 bedrooms and a single bathroom. There was no fresh air up there and absolutely no draft. All the windows seemed to be closed, which was to be expected because the neighbors had reported that the owners of this house were currently out of town. Rex and I went into the first bedroom, then the second bedroom. Everything was quiet. Then he pulled toward the bathroom at the very end of the hall. I examined the little bathroom, and overall it seemed perfectly clean. Nothing was out of place in any of these rooms. Rex sniffed around the room, checking the edge of the vanity and the floor. Then he froze. His ears went forward, and his entire body stiffened up. He started growling, looking right outside the bathroom door. His growls then turned to loud, aggressive barks. He was staring out into the hallway, growling and barking at something out there. I stepped backwards out of the bathroom with him. I asked him quietly what it was. Rex was completely locked onto something down the hallway. At the very end, near the last bedroom door, I saw what he was barking at. There was a figure standing there, this tall, dark, completely still figure, and it did not look like any of the officers downstairs. Besides, they would have in some way announced their presence to me before coming up. I identified myself as police and warned them that I had a canine with me, but there was absolutely no response to this. Then, I just flat out asked, "Who is that?" Still, there was no response. Rex was pulling in the opposite direction, which was something I had never seen him do before. He did not want to go down that hallway. Then, the figure turned and walked directly into the bedroom at the very end of the hall. I knew every officer on scene. I knew exactly where they were positioned downstairs. None of them were upstairs with me. Rex planted his feet when I tried to move forward. He pulled backwards hard. He did not want to go down that hallway. I drew my service weapon and spoke over the radio, telling the others that I had possibly located the suspect in the end bedroom and to start making their way up. I pulled Rex forward, and he resisted me the entire way. He kept looking back at me, like he did not understand why I was making him go toward that room. When we finally reached the bedroom doorway, he completely refused to cross the threshold with me. I stepped into the room first with my gun raised, but the room was empty. It was completely empty. There was just a bed against the wall and a dresser across from it. I waited for the other officers to get up there before I fully entered and searched the room. And when we finally entered, there was absolutely no one standing in there or hiding under the bed. The window was closed and locked from the inside, and even the closet was entirely empty. There was no kind of attic hatch or crawl space door anywhere in the ceiling or walls. Rex stayed out in the hallway. He simply would not step foot into that room. I expected the other officers to doubt what I saw, but they saw Rex in the way he was acting. One of them tried coaxing him into the room, but he refused. We searched every single inch of that bedroom. We checked the walls for false panels. We checked the bathroom again. We checked the other bedroom. There was not a single trapdoor anywhere. If it had not been for Rex, I feel like I would have gone completely crazy. After about 20 minutes, I told the others that I had to take Rex out of there. But before we left, he kept glancing back down the hall at that bedroom. As soon as we stepped outside into the night air, he relaxed slightly. When he was back in his crate in the patrol car, he curled up immediately. But he did not look at me the way he usually does after a search. Patrol wrapped up their investigation not long after. I have replayed that moment 1,000 times in my head. I think I believe it was a real person, maybe even the suspect, but I do not know how they escaped that room, or why Rex behaved that way. Maybe more suspicious people than me will say what Rex and I saw was a ghost. Rex has never reacted like that before or since. He has tracked armed suspects without hesitation, and entered a lot of environments that were much more stressful than that house. But that room, he just would not step inside. I trust that dog more than I trust my own instincts. Just about everyone in my department has at least one unexplainable night call, and this one was mine. When I turned 21, I joined the police force in a remote town that I will not name. The department needed new officers, and I was a young father who desperately needed money. So, the timing was perfect. Because I was a rookie, they assigned me to the night shift. It ran from 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. The guys at the station sometimes teased me about my hours, saying that I always worked the crummiest shifts. I actually did not mind them at all. I have always been a night owl anyway. Besides busting people for speeding and pulling over the occasional drunk driver, I spent most nights sitting back and listening to podcasts. In a weird way, it was kind of relaxing. After a year in the department, something happened one night that changed everything. A severe thunderstorm rolled into town and caused major power outages. The torrential downpour flooded most of the major roads, so I had to put myself in the best position possible when accident reports started coming in. I parked my cruiser in a parking lot right in the middle of town. At around 2 in the morning, our dispatcher, Claire, radioed in. She reported that someone who sounded like an adult male claimed to have been kidnapped. They told her they were being held captive inside someone's home. Then, the call suddenly ended. When she tried to redial the number, the caller did not answer. My cruiser had a built-in computer display that showed all of the call details. Based on the address, I was about 10 minutes away, so I was probably the closest officer to the scene. I radioed in and told her I would respond. I also requested backup. Another relatively new officer named Chris chimed in and said he would be on location in about 5 minutes. Claire clicked on her radio, but she hesitated for a few seconds over the static. Then, she said, the caller sounded like they were altering their voice in some way, possibly through digital means, to make themselves sound like a child. She used the specific phrase, like a young girl. She concluded that officers should proceed with extreme caution. All of us were pretty close at the station, so we always felt nervous for one another during high-risk cases like this. I radioed back and said 10-4, then drove off to the scene as fast as I could. When I turned into the neighborhood, I saw that every single street lamp was out. The entire block had completely lost power. That meant we would have very low visibility into the home we were investigating, which put us in greater danger. I followed my GPS to the end of the street where the house was, and I saw that Chris had already beaten me there. His cruiser was idling in front of the house. I pulled up next to him and rolled down my window. Chris commented on the home's poor condition. I glanced ahead, taking it in for myself. The grass in the front yard was knee-high. Overgrown bushes blocked out most of the front windows. The roof was visibly dented in several areas and had a ton of missing shingles. The place looked completely abandoned. This immediately sent off alarm bells in my head. You can usually gather a lot about someone's mental state by how they treat their living space. I told Chris I would take the lead on this one. We both stepped out of our cruisers into the pouring rain, opened our umbrellas, and followed a waterlogged path up to the front door. Chris clicked on his heavy flashlight. Whenever a second officer like Chris is present during an investigation, their entire job is to protect the leading officer by monitoring the suspect's body language. If the suspect makes a move on the cop that is interrogating them, The backup officer is supposed to neutralize the threat. Chris made the perfect backup because he was both incredibly observant and calm under pressure. This allowed me to focus solely on the suspect's story and decide if I was hearing the truth. When we reached the front door, I rang the bell. Then, we stood there listening for any movement inside. After a few seconds, footsteps shuffled slowly up to the door. Then they paused. Whoever was on the other side was completely still, just waiting and listening. A feeling came over me that we were being watched. Slowly, my gaze drifted over to the peephole. As soon as I made eye contact with it, a distorted shape moved back quickly, like whoever was watching us had pulled their head away. I called out, "If you are in there, we would like to ask you a few questions. Open up, please." They froze again inside, as if they were thinking about what to do next. Then, the lock started turning, and the door creaked open, but only by about a foot. From the darkness inside, a man peeked out of the crack. He looked like he was in his early 30s. He was overweight, balding, and wore thick-brimmed glasses. I took a single look into his eyes, and immediately sensed that he was hiding something. I informed him that we had received a call from his address, from someone claiming to have been kidnapped. The man acted confused. He apologized and told us it must have been a pocket dial. I asked him if it was a pocket dial. Then how could he explain the strange voice in the phone call? For a split second, the man averted his gaze, then said he did not know anything about a voice. I asked him if there was anyone else in the house, and he said he lived completely alone. Then, I told him that for safety reasons we needed to have a quick look inside. "Not without a warrant," he said. "These days, a warrant can be obtained in minutes." I went back to my cruiser, called dispatch, and requested immediate communication with the on-call magistrate. 5 minutes later, Claire came back on the radio and told me the judge had approved a telephonic warrant and emailed it over. We were clear to enter. I walked back up and showed the digital warrant to the man. He reluctantly pulled the front door open, and I could see that his hands were visibly shaking. I clicked on my own flashlight and stepped inside. A putrid, sour smell immediately hit me. I scanned around to find the source of the odor and saw a hallway straight ahead and a room directly to my right. I shined my light into that room and saw what looked like a living room. It was absolutely disgusting. Piles of dirty clothes and stacks of sticky dishes were spread across the stained carpet. Cockroaches were even crawling all over them. A couch that looked like it was pulled off the side of the road sat at an odd angle against the wall. This man obviously used this room as his main living space. I had seen these sorts of living conditions in heavy drug cases before. When I turned to look back at the man, he shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. I made a mental note to check the place for drug paraphernalia once I had confirmed the house was safe. Then, I stepped toward the hallway. My foot struck something on the floor. I looked down. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw a pink Barbie doll playhouse that I knew I had seen before. I thought about it and realized I had bought this exact same toy set for my daughter last year on Christmas. I turned and asked the man if he had any kids. He quickly said no, but explained to us that sometimes his nieces came over to visit, so he kept a few toys around for them. Chris and I exchanged a long look. No mother in her right mind would ever allow children into this filthy, dangerous environment. I told him this was his absolute last chance to tell me if anyone else was in the house. He assured me there was not. I started my way down the hallway, and the man tried to follow close behind me, saying that there was nothing down there to see. Chris quickly yanked him back by his arm and ordered him to stay put. The hallway had an open room on either side, and a closed wooden door at the very end, which I assumed was probably the basement. I peeked inside the first room, scanning from right to left, and saw more children's toys and even items like diapers scattered across the floor. In the corner of the room, the dark shape of a person was hunched over. I drew my service weapon instantly,